Welcome back to the channel, everyone. This is a moment that a lot of people have been waiting for. And as you can see by the title, we got our final 2023 NFL predictive mock draft. Now I'm gonna get straight into this thing because we got a lot of talking points and I already have some things written down, but I'm just gonna display it and we're gonna talk about some picks more than others in this mock draft. And that's starting with number 1, Bryce Young. I think that's kind of the consensus. We can kind of pencil that in and lock it in. So I don't want to spend too much time talking about that one. I think the draft really starts at overall 2. And that's Will Anderson. I'm taking him right here. It's not a quarterback. And it's really an interesting thing. Talk about DeMeco Ryans, his philosophy. What did he have in San Francisco? You had Nick Bosa, that bookend pass rusher, and then you kind of built around that. You had a solid, you want to build around the 3-tech, build around the nose, and get another guy who offers some different things as far as his rush package. It's a really solid defense, and we also want those athletic linebackers. I think Christian Harris is somebody to watch out for in this defense. Derek Stingley can still pop off. But we get Will Anderson, 10-year plus. He's going to give us double-digit sacks. Now, I don't think he's ever going to be a la like a TJ Watt or like a Myles Garrett. I don't think he's of that essence, but I do think he is still a great rusher, and he's the kind of guy that you want to build around. Now, number 3, I didn't trade the pick, and I didn't trade the pick because I couldn't find a trade partner. Now, I looked at the Las Vegas Raiders. They're in quarterback market. And I looked at the Tennessee Titans, who we could also say are in quarterback market. But are they really? Now, being in quarterback market and being desperate are two completely different things. I think these teams, they would like a quarterback, but I don't think they're mortgaging their future. Now, let me talk about the Raiders for a second because I really looked into it. And the more and more I found myself talking out of that quarterback thing. Now, this is the 27th total defense last year, 29th pass defense. And I looked at the cornerback depth chart, Duke Shelley, Nate Hobbs, David Long Jr. I'm not really a fan of that. And I'm not a fan of the depth or the guys at the top. Now, these are some solid players, but if we want to compete in that division, especially because it's pass heavy, probably the pass heaviest division, we're going to need some better guys than that. So we're going to get further into their pick later on. And the Tennessee Titans, it's just a lot that it would take to get from 11 to 3. Let's think about that because this is a team that's trying to get it right. They're trying to get it together. They got Mike Vrabel. They re-signed Jeffrey Simmons. They have the pieces that can kind of compete in the AFC, especially in that division. I think there's still a window. But if we just blow it up and mortgage our future to get a CJ Stroud or Richardson, what do we really have here? Because we still need receivers. We still can get corners. We still can get offensive line. So I didn't find myself doing that with this 3rd pick. Now, if you want to take a quarterback later, and we're going to get into that as well, you can do that, but we're not coming to 3 to do it. So number 3, I got Tyree Wilson. I like everything about Tyree Wilson, and he's kind of a prospect that's grown on me because the first time I watched film, I'm not going to lie, I was not a fan the first time I watched film. And at that point, I still had Myles Murphy rated over him. And I do still like Myles Murphy, even though he's probably going to go a little bit lower in this first round. But I think that now Tyree Wilson, those traits are something that's hard to find. And I wouldn't compare it to the Trayvon Walker effect because I don't think it's of the same magnitude, but I do think he's a solid athlete. Now, I don't think his bend is quite where you would want it to be for an edge rusher, but he can stand up. He can put his hand in the dirt. He can line up over tackles. He's more of that traditional defensive end, whereas we look at Will Anderson, he's kind of a hybrid end linebacker type of role. So I like Wilson, and I like what he did at Texas Tech, the short area burst. He's going to come in, and I've talked about it so much, but I like his run potential. Now, of course, you get an edge. You're really thinking about the pass rush upside, but playing against the run, Tyree Wilson is going to be a monster. And this gets me into my next pick. Now, the Colts, because this has affected them too. They didn't have to trade up into that 3 spot because they felt comfortable and they were secure that they were going to get that second quarterback off the board. Right here, they get it, and that's CJ Stroud for me. And I'm hearing a lot of Will Levis thing. I just think he woke up, ate some banana peels, told a couple family members he was going number 1. He wasn't in his right state of mind. But I like CJ Stroud at number 4, and I think it was just electric. Watching the draft combine, we saw it. It felt like he was throwing the football in his home stadium. And now it is his home stadium in this scenario. So I mean, CJ Stroud, there's some things we can nitpick about him, but I'm not here to tear him down because overall, he is one of the better quarterbacks. He's still that second best quarterback to me. People talk about the upside. I've heard a lot of comparisons, Jared Goff, some other guys who are kind of average tier quarterbacks. I think CJ Stroud has a level in him that he can unlock that will be better than that. Because I see him as a guy. I've heard him talk in rooms. And now there's some guys who can talk in rooms that can't play football like they talk in rooms. But I think CJ Stroud, we have to look at what he did in college. And I know it's not always translating, especially for Ohio State quarterbacks. But I believe he's of that small percentage that can make that translation, that can do special things. Now, Jalen Carter is my pick to the Seahawks. And it's really kind of simple for me. You got that 20th pick as well. How many times are we going to be picking in the top 5? When I do have that rare occasion of picking in the top 5, I want to get a generational player. That generational player for me is Jalen Carter. I haven't seen many prospects like him. Now, I could think Quinton Williams, Dexter Lawrence was pretty nice coming out of Clemson. Those are some guys off the interior. Look at him in the NFL. So you're kind of getting that package. Now we want to slow down on the red flags. We want to hone some of those things in and make sure he's an upright citizen, upright, doing everything the right way. And I think in that Seattle culture, in that locker room, we can build that. Now, I don't think Jalen Carter is a bad person. I just think he made a couple mistakes. And Pete Carroll, that, like I said, the culture, having those veterans in the room, that's going to do him well. They also have veterans on the defensive line, have veterans on the interior and out that he can work with, that he can talk to and just build a bond with, and that's going to be a special defense. Now, number 6. This is another team that can be kind of quarterback spicy, but I didn't pick a quarterback for them. I got Christian Gonzalez. Now, I'm going to just read off what I wrote about Christian Gonzalez because I thought about quarterback, but then I see that window. Now, this is a team that went out and got Cam Sutton, went out and got Emmanuel Mosley, traded Jeff Okudah, but that's not really impacting why I'm making this pick, because with or without Jeff Okudah, I do think Mosley and Sutton were kind of the guys coming from different teams but playing solid. Now, what I think is that window, because in the NFC, it's kind of wide open to me. Now, I look at Philadelphia, I look at San Francisco, if we think Minnesota can recapture what they had last season. But outside of that, you get a team, and that's why Seattle makes a lot of sense with Jalen Carter to me, because you get that player like that, and then you can build it. And this is a division that likes to run the ball. I'm talking about Seattle and Detroit. We both are in divisions that like to run the ball, and we have to stop the run. Now, getting Christian Gonzalez is kind of a value pick, but I do think he's a blue chip player. I do think Cam Sutton can play in the slot, and I think Emmanuel Mosley can be that depth/insurance policy. Now, we got to understand a couple things, certainly, because with the Detroit Lions, I think the general consensus is shifting towards Christian Gonzalez. I still like Devon Witherspoon, and I want to know what you guys think about Devon Witherspoon, but he's my best corner in this draft, and I don't think it's that close. I don't think it's that far apart, though. Now, Christian Gonzalez gives you more size, but I think Devon Witherspoon plays with a bigger edge. He may be 6 feet, 5'11", 180. He may be those measurements, but at the end of the day, he covers, he has instincts, he doesn't lack athleticism. And look at how he plays the run. If you haven't watched film on him yet, look at him in that run game. And that kind of shows flashes of Jalen Ramsey to me. Jalen Ramsey is one of the corners that I like because he comes up and makes plays against the run. But he's a bigger frame. Devon Witherspoon isn't nowhere near his size, but he still plays with that tenacity. He has an it factor for me. And going into my 7th pick, I have Devon Witherspoon. Going to the Las Vegas Raiders, they've been mocked offensive line. They've been mocked quarterback. I have them going corner right here. And this is really what I'm seeing, what I'm thinking is going to happen because, like I said, I looked deep into it. I looked at the statistics. I looked at the players. I looked at what they usually kind of do. And this just makes a lot of sense to me. It's really best player available and kind of a positional need. So when we think about it, we have positional needs. We can name off all of them. But when we look at the players available at those needs, I think he jumps up when we talk about that scale, weighing need and blue chip, need and player. So now I have number 8. And this is where it got kind of feisty. This is where we see our first trade in the draft, because I couldn't really find nobody for the Atlanta Falcons. I have the defensive lineman off the board. I got my top 2 corners off the board. So I said, okay, let's move back a little bit. And, you know, Nolan Smith has been mocked to this team. And I see that as a possibility, but I don't think that's what's going to happen, especially in this scenario. And I had them trade with the Tennessee Titans. Now, I told you we were going to come back to the Tennessee Titans and talk about that team. Now we're here talking about them. And for the Tennessee Titans, I think this makes a lot of sense, because Anthony Richardson is still on that board. You move from 11 to 8, you go get him. It's really simple for that. And I think for the Tennessee Titans, you had Malik Willis, you drafted him. I was not as high on Malik Willis as I am high on Anthony Richardson. Now, Malik Willis, he was kind of that dual threat package coming out of college, but there was a lot to work on. And I think the general consensus of Anthony Richardson is that there's a lot to work on. But if you really break down the film, and I think out of every quarterback, I've probably watched film on Anthony Richardson the most. And this is why I can feel very firm and confident in my take on Richardson. Some of those things are not true that you're hearing. You're hearing the inaccurate. You're hearing the pocket mobility, can't read defenses. I'm not really seeing that. When I see Anthony Richardson, I see a guy that thinks a couple steps ahead. Now, of course, he has his weaknesses, but in the general evaluation, he's a couple steps ahead. He's further than you would think he is, a lot further than you would think he is, based on what guys are saying, what's came out about him. Now, number 9, I got Paris Johnson. Kind of booked that in. You know, first offensive lineman off the board, goes to Chicago, can play left or right tackle, whatever they want to do. Got Braxton and Tevin. Chicago, we've talked about this a lot, but I like that pick. It doesn't take a lot of time to talk about why I like that pick. Now, number 10, it's not Bijan Robinson. I'm sorry, Philadelphia Eagles fans, you didn't get your running back. There's a lot of running backs in this draft, and it kind of brought me to this decision. You got Cam Jurgens in that right guard spot currently, but are you really confident in that? And there is no indication to me that you've been so confident in that take, because I know Lane Johnson is there. I know Mailata is there. I know Kelsey is there, Dickerson. But if we add Peter Skoronski, and he still has tackle flexibility. Now, when Lane Johnson retires, whatever they want to do with him, that's going to be up to them and that coaching staff. But right now, he's a plug-and-play guard. And Cam Jurgens, he can just be the center whenever Kelsey leaves. This is Kelsey's last season, so we let Cam Jurgens be a rotational piece. He starts at center. We got Skoronski, and then we have whatever's left of Lane Johnson. It was really kind of simple for me. Even though I wanted to go Bijan, I see some other running backs in this draft, and I felt kind of confident. Now, number 11, we got the Atlanta Falcons back on the clock. They traded from 8, 3 spots back. I took Bijan. Now, you probably say Nolan Smith or Lucas Van Ness still on the board at this point. I didn't take those guys because I thought about the philosophy. The best running back in this draft, I think safe to say, probably the best running back prospect since Saquon that I remember. He can do it all. And I talk about the mark of a good player when we're actively searching for weaknesses. We can't actively search for weaknesses in Bijan's game. What is he going to say? He can't run 40 yards past a DB? How many times are you going to run 40 yards past a DB in the NFL? Now, in college, you might have those breakaway opportunities. These guys aren't that bad. And also, these DBs are a lot faster. So we think of an A-Chain, we think of a Gibbs. Yeah, they can kick into that second gear. But realistically, they're not going to have those same breakaway opportunities. And you get Bijan, you still got Al Greer. And really the key selling point for me is Patterson, 32 years old, last year of his contract. Even if you want to renew it, which I don't think you have to, this year, you could play him in the slot. You got a three-headed snake, three-headed monster. And then we could have 2 1,000-yard rushers. This is how much the Falcons run the ball. And they're going to have Ritter or Taylor Heineke, whichever one they want to start. It's up in the air still. Did a breakdown on Ritter, though. I think he has some promise. Check that out. But I like this move. But I do think, interesting enough, you got Kyle Pitts coming back. You got Mac Hollins coming in. And you got Drake London. So I was thinking kind of, why is nobody talking about receiver for this team? But then you think about Kyle Pitts, he kind of is that guy. Then you got Jonnu Smith. So I'm interested to see how they're going to be using Kyle Pitts this season. Thinking about some slot, you can even line him up in an X roles. Truly, we have to remember, even though he hasn't had the production that we think he should, Kyle Pitts is a unicorn. So I feel very comfortable with this pick. Now getting into number 12, the Texans still got their guy, and they didn't even get him at 2. Got Will Levis. Now, Will Levis, another guy who I think being wrongly convicted of being just a bust. How are you a bust and you haven't even reached the NFL yet? I don't see what a lot of other people are seeing. When I watch quarterbacks, I think Will Levis has a lot of promise. Now, it can go wrong. It definitely can go wrong. But I do think as far as his anticipation. And now what I'm not going to say is, because I'm hearing people say he's and this is funny. They're saying because he played with such a bad offensive line, because his weapons weren't up to par, he didn't have the supporting cast that's going to help him in the NFL because it's speeding up his clock, speeding up his processor. Now understand, if your processor speed up to such a fast speed, you're going to be seeing things that aren't there. And you're going to be reading plays and route concepts so fast, you're not letting things fully develop. So that's the only thing that kind of worries me with Levis. But I do think he's on a different page. And I think his young receiving core, some of those guys, it made him look worse than what it really was. So I do want to see him with the supporting cast. I think Houston has some solid receivers. They got a mixture of some younger guys and some older guys. You got Will Anderson on that defense. You got Will and Will. So 13. Green Bay Packers, I went Jackson, Smith-NJIGBA. Now, I kind of was thinking about Lucas Van Ness at this point, but I don't think, because we kind of had this situation when we could have got a weapon, we got Rashawn Gary. Now, do they want to go defensive line again, which I think they could, but, I mean, you get Jackson Smith-NJIGBA, you add him with Romeo Doubs, and you add him with Christian Watson. We got to think, Cobb and Lazard are gone. Jordan Love's coming in the door. We got to get this guy weapons. Now, we still got the running attack, and hopefully they still work with the running attack. Hopefully they don't go past Happy. But I do like this move for this team, and I think it's kind of realistic what I really see happening for them. Number 14, I got Lucas Van Ness. Now, this was kind of the oddball, and I came to this decision. It took me a little minute, because I was looking at some players. We still had Broderick Jones on the board and Darnell Wright. We still had those tackles there. But I think about Lucas Van Ness, and I looked at it. I don't necessarily like the Patriots pass rush out of Uche and past Judon. I mean, looking at those guys, they could add a guy like Lucas Van Ness. And it's really an upside pick. This is kind of a Bill Belichick vibe to me. I don't think they're going to get an offensive weapon. Now, the other pick that I could see is tackle. Because going to my 15 pick, we got Broderick Jones right after that. Now, I do like the Jets offensive line, and I want to talk about why I made this pick, because I like Darnell Wright too. But I think Darnell Wright, coming out of college, has some of the same concerns that we had with Mekhi Becton. And because we're seeing how Mekhi Becton is playing out in the NFL, when he's healthy, he's a monster. He's dominant, but he hasn't been as healthy. And then we got Dwayne Brown on the other side. So whatever side, and probably Dwayne Brown because he's older, he's probably going to retire very soon. So we kick Broderick Jones into this spot. And then we got Mekhi Becton, who can hopefully be healthy. I mean, that's a very solid offensive line for Aaron Rodgers to work with. And we already talked about the weapons. I think for this pick, you can't go anywhere but offensive line. And defense, it would be a hard selling point to me, because Aaron Rodgers, he just touched 40 today. There's not going to be a lot of mobility within Aaron Rodgers, but I do think if you protect him, he can still pick you apart. And we just got to see it. Now, number 16, I got Deonte Banks. And I do think Deonte Banks is ranked higher than Joey Porter for me. I do think that the Washington Commanders at this point will take Deonte Banks over Joey Porter, because the athleticism is such a high upside. And that's kind of the thing when we talk about Gonzalez versus Witherspoon. It's really that profile. Look at his size. Look at everything. Now, Joey Porter, he has those 34-inch arms. He's not short at all. But as far as his athletic profile, Deonte Banks clears. Now, I'm not saying Joey Porter is an average athlete, but he's not an upper tier athlete. He still can cover. He still can press guys. But I do think Deonte Banks, as far as man coverage and some other things and his instincts, he has the slight edge, the very slight edge. And it all depends on the scheme as well. I think Joey Porter can be really great in a zone scheme, and I think Deonte Banks can be really good in a man scheme. Now, like I said, it just depends on how you want to use these guys. And it could be interchangeable for me. I'm not going to sit here and say that one guy clears another guy. It's just like Witherspoon and Gonzalez. It's interchangeable. Now, number 17. For the Pittsburgh Steelers, I got Joey Porter. Now, corner is somewhere they have to attack. I'm a Steelers guy. Corner is somewhere they have to attack because we got to understand, you still got to kill a Witherspoon, but you lost Cameron Sutton. You lost Terrell Edmonds. You can't ignore the back end. Even though you got Minka, you got DeMonte Kazi, but something has to get done right there. And I look at the tackles left on the board, maybe DeJuan Jones, maybe Anton Harrison. I'm not taking that at 17. So unless they trade up, I think this is the pick. And I don't see the Steelers trading up in a scenario like this unless they were really, really sold on the tackle. I'm not getting that indication to this point. Now, 18, KALIJAH KANCEY. And for the longest, it's been kind of interchangeable for me. I've had KALIJAH KANCEY, I've had Bryan Bresee. But the reason I went with KALIJAH KANCEY is because I was just thinking about it. You got that penetrating 3-tech. You could also line him up out. So you could also line him up at defensive end. He's going to be a monster in this team. Now think about it, because the Detroit Lions, they're a team that loves situational rushers. We've seen James Houston impact on this team. Aiden Hutchinson is a dog on this team. So if we get KALIJAH KANCEY, he could be a situational rusher. And what we really want to do is, we have some guys on the interior, Isaiah Biggs, but we're not really the best on the interior. And I do think if you want to get another nose tackle, you could address that later. But right here, I think KALIJAH KANCEY is too much to pass up on. Now, if you want to take Bryan Bresee, I could easily get sold on that point. But I think just based off prediction, I do see KALIJAH KANCEY going in this range. I would say anywhere from 18 to 25-ish, because some people are low on him, but I don't think the NFL has soured on KALIJAH KANCEY, and for a lot of reasons. Agility, finesse, his moves on the inside, can play the 3 technique, can play the 4-eye, can play the 4. He can do a lot of things from that inside-outside versatility. Now, I think Bryan Bresee has that inside-outside versatility, but I just think as a pass rusher strictly, KALIJAH KANCEY has the higher upside. Now, if you want a guy who's balanced, who can give you that run defense, Bryan Bresee might be your guy, but he doesn't have that twitchiness of a KALIJAH KANCEY. Now, understand, if it weren't for the injuries, this could be an injury thing, because I've talked about it. His first couple of years, I saw a guy that was on pace with Jalen Carter. And this year, and we know he had the things, prayers out to him for that as well, but he was also injured in this season. So that can play a role in it too. But I think his best football is ahead of him. I would not mind if you replace KALIJAH KANCEY with this pick, but I have KANCEY going here. Now, 19, I went Darnell Wright. Darnell Wright over some other guys who he may have wanted for this team. Over a Nolan Smith, over a weapon. The corners are going off the board at this point that I like. And I just think Tristan Wirfs, I looked into it, and I've seen some things, him going to left tackle. Now, I believe he can hold up at left tackle. I just want to see kind of the foot speed. How do you deal with those rushers? Now, we understand the NFL has gotten to a point where we got elite rushers coming off the left and the right side. So if you can play tackle, you can kind of play tackle. And it's just all about who you want on your blind side. I think Darnell Wright is a guy who you want on that right side. And we're just going to see what Tristan Wirfs can do. I don't think he's going to be worse than Donovan Smith, leading the league in holding calls. I can say that for sure. So I like this pick, and I felt good about that. Also adding some nastiness to them. They need to be able to run the football. Last year, they couldn't run it worth a lick. And if you have Tom Brady looking terrible, now Tom Brady did get a little older. He wasn't his best this season. But if Tom Brady can't work on your offense, what quarterback can? That's screaming, get us some offensive line help. Now, number 20, I went Jordan Addison. And this is the Seattle Seahawks. Another interesting pick that I kind of went back and forth about. I've seen Zay Flowers. I've seen a lot of different guys, but I think Jordan Addison fits for me because Tyler Lockett can beat you deep. DK Metcalf can beat you deep. And also Tyler Lockett, the talking point I have for him, he's getting a bit older, and also he's going to be up in a couple of years. So if you don't want to re-sign him once he gets older, once his contract's up, Jordan Addison can slide right into that complimentary 2 spot. Still going to have Metcalf. But as far as having him now, because if you draft them right here, all 3 of them are going to be playing together. And I think Jordan Addison can play slot. He can play outside receiver. Tyler Lockett can play slot. He can play outside receiver. But I think Jordan Addison is the fit because I watched a lot of Seahawks game. I watched film on them, and I think they were missing that third possession receiver. I don't think Jordan Addison's a burner. We saw the testing running 4.5 at that size, but I do think he's a possession receiver. I think he's a great route runner, can separate from guys. And how are you going to game plan against Lockett? How are you going to game plan against Metcalf? How are you going to game plan against Addison thrown into that mix? So I really like that. And yes, they can use interior offensive line help, but there's some couple guys who are steals in this draft for them to get. Now, 21, this is where I kind of shook it up. I think Dalton Kincaid may be the pick for the Chargers, because I thought about it. You got Gerald Everett. You got some solid tight ends, but I didn't go receiver here. I didn't go Zay Flowers or Quentin Johnson because I think about attacking. Now, I'm in football mode when I'm thinking about this. I'm thinking about schemes and defenses. If I'm a defensive coordinator, you have 3 receivers, there are some things I can do to stop that. But if you got guys attacking, if you got Mike Williams attacking from the right side of the field, you got Keenan Allen attacking from the left side of the field, and then we have that guy who's the mismatch and creates different things with a different variety of route concepts across the middle of the field, now we're kind of in a bind. What's that gonna make my safety do? What's the pressure that's gonna put on my corners? Because I can't throw that safety over you in cover 2. I can't throw you in cover 3 because you can't really guard a Keenan Allen or a Mike Williams in a one-on-one situation. So that's what I was really thinking about from a football scheme specifically. I think a tight end as far as Dalton Kincaid adds more than what a receiver would add because of his alignments, because of the different things he can do. And also he has to work on his blocking. I think he can. Now, number 22, I had Nolan Smith. Nolan Smith screams a Raven for me. Now, Nolan Smith is kind of low, but I do think he's going to go in that mid-teen to early 20s range. I've seen him in the top 10. I don't think he's a top 10 player. Now, at his peak, it's arguable, but had the injury, some things going on, but his leadership. We know what he is as a player. He's explosive. He can stop the run, especially at that size, which is kind of surprising. He's about 6'2", 240, but he does that well. Now, he's going to have to add some finesse to his pass rush game. Like I said, especially at that size, and that's what I keep going back to, because how are you going to power through guys with that frame at the next level? I think you can, but will it be consistent? That's the biggest question through all of this. Will it be consistent with Nolan Smith? But I think his explosiveness will kind of get him through early. And then as you work with defensive line coaches, you will get better. And also another talking point I want to go touch on quickly for the Ravens. I kind of like their receiving core. Now, I've seen receivers mocked to them, but I think about it. They got Andy Isabella. They got Devin Duvernay, Rashad Bateman coming back healthy, and Odell. I'm feeling pretty good about those weapons. Now, none of those guys scream solid, solidified number 1, but I think the collection of them, and it's still out to be determined about Bateman, whether he can be that guy. But I really like that receiving core, so I stuck with that, and I went defense for a team that I think could add a rotational pass rusher. Now, 23, I went Quentin Johnson. This is the complement to Justin Jefferson. Zay Flowers, some other guys, even defense can be in play right here. But I just think Quentin Johnson taking that pressure off of Justin Jefferson, that's kind of what you need. That's kind of what the doctor ordered. And in this scenario, he fell perfectly in the board for them. Kirk Cousins is still on that team. Now, will Kirk Cousins be the future of that team? That's still up for debate. But I do think it's interesting him being there, and we never know. Quentin Johnson, he could be an average player. He could be a Kevin White. But at the same time, he could be a very high-level receiver with those traits, with the speed. He just has to attack the ball a little differently. Now, I watched it, kind of lets the ball come to him, and you would think with that size, you're going to get it. But that's not really his play style, not really what he does. Also, a great guy after the run. You can throw him on some screen passes, get him things of that nature. So, I really like him. Key thing, we saw in the playoff game, he had the run and he broke it off, broke a tackle and he was gone. So that's the type of package you're getting with Quentin Johnson. Now, number 24, I got Brian Branch to the Jacksonville Jaguars. And once it got in this 24 range, things got kind of shaky, but I felt very confident in Brian Branch with this pick. Now, offensive line could also be a pick, some questionable things, but you get him in that nickel spot. I think you move Darius Williams back to the outside. You got a combination of him. You got Tyson Campbell, and you got Brian Branch in there. And we got to think about the back end. We got Rashawn Jenkins, and then we got Cisco. So I'm feeling pretty solid about that five group, and then we could play that base nickel. I'm thinking about Baltimore Ravens because Evaluating Brian Branch, I see Kyle Pitts. Now, understand, I don't think that Brian Branch is going to be a 2 high safety or a 1 high safety at the next level. I think he is a nickel, but there's a lot of value in that to me because really post Roquan, but honestly, Kyle Hamilton was balling all last season once he figured it out. And that was one of the best defenses, and not a top 3 defense in the NFL once he figured it out, started making plays, forcing fumbles, doing things of that nature from the nickel spot. So I think that Kyle Hamilton effect, we can kind of expect that from Brian Branch. Now, 25. This was the awkward pick for me because linebacker is a need, corner is a need, but we got to play by the board. And as I played by the board, I didn't find any receivers. I don't think Zay Flowers was the guy here. And I looked at the New York Giants depth chart, and I felt kind of solid about it. You got Paris Campbell. I really like Isaiah Hodgins. I want to see what he does in another year. But you still got Darius Slayton. You still got Sterling Shepard. How many receivers will you need? Now, it's all about if these guys can stay healthy. But this is a pretty solid receiver class. And as we evaluate more and more of these guys, Marvin Mims, Jonathan Mingo, Jaden Reed, Tyler Scott, we can revisit that. But I think a guy that won't be there with our next pick, John Michael Schmitz. We need a center, our starter and our backup left. I'm plugging in John Michael Schmitz. I'm letting him start. He's going to be a dog. I don't know if he's going to have that Creed Humphrey or that Linderbaum effect, but we're kind of hoping for that because those guys have been cogs in the middle of their team's offensive line. So at 26, Michael Mayer was the pick for me, and it was the slide. I ended the slide, and I think this is a perfect scenario because you got Hendershot and Ferguson, but you lost Dalton Schultz. And understand that when Dalton Schultz was on the football field, this team was a lot better. So I think if we're plugging in Michael Mayer, we have a very solid team, and I like what we got because Michael Mayer, he can block, he can catch the ball, and then we still got Brandon Cook, still got CD, still got Michael Gallup. So we're going to feel very, very good about our receiver core. We got to help Dak. Dak has to help himself, but at the end of the day, we're giving him all the weapons so that he cannot fail. And I mean, I love that pick. Now, 27 for the Buffalo Bills, I went Osiris Torrance. Didn't want to go Zay Flowers here. I think they could use receiver. Didn't go linebacker here. Now, it's interesting for me because Jack Campbell, Drew Sanders, Trenton Simpson, I really like Jack Campbell, but I don't feel safe taking those guys right here. Now, if you really, really want to get a linebacker, you might just have to move back up a couple spots and get one. If not, they don't fall in that second round at your selection. But Osiris Torrance was the pick for me. I think you plug him and play him from day one, and he adds that. Now, when I watched that Bengals game in the playoffs, they got wrecked. The offensive line for Buffalo got wrecked, and it was particularly from the inside. And the interior rush is the worst rush for a quarterback. So we're solidifying that. Now, he's really going to be a guy that's going to shine in the run game. If we're throwing stunts at him, we're asking him to move laterally and blocking and pass sets, he may struggle a bit. But I think he can get used to that, use his frame to his ability, use his hand strength to his ability. So I don't have no problems and no worries about Osiris Torrance being a next level, high level guard. 28, I went Cam Smith. I've seen Emmanuel Forbes mock to this team a lot, but I went Cam Smith because I'm still high on Cam Smith. It's the mindset for me. And also, the tape isn't as bad. Now, I understand he's a bit handsy. You know, he has great instincts, though. And against the run, he may get lost because of his frame, because of his play strength. But he's tenacious. He has tenacity. And I think that's going to really be a calling card for him. You just got to want it more than the next guy. And I think he wants it. If he gets beat on the play deep, he's going to come back. He's going to have that same burning passion, and he's going to want it again. So it's kind of a close call, but I really like Cam Smith. I think he could be a man corner. Like I said, can get a bit more play strength. I wouldn't say he needs physicality, but he can get a bit more play strength to add to his frame. And then we're talking about a very, very good starting corner because for Cincinnati, our corner room is really kind of struggling. I like Mike Hilton. Outside of that, you got Taylor Britt. I mean, we have some solid guys, but we're in no means safe at the corner position. 29, I went Myles Murphy. The fall for Myles Murphy stops. You lost Marcus Davenport. I don't really like much that you have outside of Cam Jordan, so I got Myles Murphy here. And like I said, another guy who's going to come in and going to stop the run. Powerful, athletic. He just has to work on some of the hand placement, work on some of the pass. It's really just kind of an underdeveloped athletic freak. He's another one of those guys that we have in the draft. And it feels kind of, cliche to say such a thing. But really, though, I mean, watch him at Clemson. I think this year was down from the previous year that we saw Myles Murphy, but he does have a really high ceiling for me. Now, there's some teams in here that can go get him, and we're talking about anywhere from 18 up to 29 can get him. But he went 29 for me, and I still feel good about it, still feel good about the size, and I think he's a great scheme fit. Now, 30s, I had Jahmyr Gibbs. This was kind of the hard pick for me because I just think you have to get a running back. Now, it depends on what running back you get. Now, I think BIJAN and Jahmyr Gibbs are a level above everyone else. But you get Jahmyr Gibbs, you got Kenneth Gainwell, you got Rashad Penny, Scott. I mean, overall, that's a pretty solid running back group. And then I think he can catch the ball as well. You got your offensive lineman. What I was really thinking here was potentially a 3-tech or potentially an edge player. Now, Bryan Bresee, Uzomah, ADDISON, some guys who are still on the board, and we can talk about it in the comments who you would think about in that pick. I think ADDISON might sneak into the first round, but like I said, it's predictive, and the way the board fell, I just didn't see it. So Jahmyr Gibbs, we know what he is at this point. Did it all for Alabama. Was one of those big time playmakers. Adding him into this RPO system, read option with Jalen Hurts, it's gonna be something beautiful, and I mean truly. Now, 31. This was kind of the flyer. I went Anton Harrison. I mean, I think at this point he's a technical tackle. He's not a mauler by any means. He can add play strength. He can add tenacity. But for this scheme, I don't think you need that. Because I think about Orlando Brown, and I'm not comparing him to Orlando Brown, but he's not a guy who's just mauling people. I mean, Orlando Brown is huge. By physical standards, he's massive. But Anton Harrison, I think his technical will help him for this team because he's going to be in a lot of pass sets. We know this is a team that likes to drop back. Sometimes Andy Reid can switch it up and run it down your throat. Pacheco, hope he has another great season, rooting for him. But I feel like this is the pick. DeJuan Jones, I just don't feel like he's a scheme fit. Because, like I said, thinking about what he's going to be asked to do. Anton Harris is not the greatest mover, but he's an average mover. He's a better mover than DeJuan Jones. And I just like him better for this scheme. I think he has a lot to work on, especially in the run game. But in the pass game, he can hold up. This is a team that lost their tackle, going to need tackle. So, and then the verdict is still kind of out on Jawan Taylor as a left tackle. They made that move in free agency, signed him to replace Orlando Brown. So, still interested to see that for the Kansas City Chiefs. But this is my mock draft. My predictive mock draft, what I think is going to happen. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. By the time you see this video, we're going to be less than 24 hours away from the draft. This is probably my longest video, but I had to talk about it because I haven't done a mock draft in a minute, and I've been working on this. It took a lot of time to write this out, write down my thoughts about these players, my write-ups on just about all my first round guys, and some guys who missed the cut. Bryan Bresee, ADDISON, who else missed the cut? Uzomah, Will McDonald, some pretty good players who just didn't make. DeJuan Jones, Jack Campbell, Drew Sanders. I mean, I could go on and on. But I think at the end of the day, when we get into those late rounds, those players is kind of fringe. And they're not, guaranteed. But you made it this far. Thank you for watching. Subscribe if you like the video. We coming with more. We're going to be reacting to everything that happens in the draft. Going to try to go live tomorrow during this draft, but we're going to see what we can do. But again, thank you for watching as always. That's going to do it for today. We out.